Let's look at who am I and what do I represent. I'm Ezekiel Ogbole. I represent Blue Dive Tech Lab and I represent it as the Chief Executive Officer. Now, at Blue Dive Tech Lab, we spend most of our time in the space of technology, and what we are doing is that we are trying to curate technically what an organization can do responsibly and what it can deploy. So we are the intersection between what technology can technically do and what an organization can deploy responsibly. Agentic AI has over the past 18 to 20 years, or rather 18 to 20 months, made that gap the central question in nearly every boardroom you enter. And most every boardroom you enter today, Agentic AI has become one of the most important agenda on the table. What we found as we set out to do this remarkable presentation, what I found and what we found as a team was in the process of synthesizing the market data and in the process of synthesizing intellectual research, both academic and non-academic, and through our search on regulatory records, we discovered that Agentic AI is a story or a part of our journey that requires more disciplined approach. Now, we find also that organizations that are capturing real value from Agentic AI are not the ones that are moving fastest. They are the ones that are providing governance, measuring, and scaling the adoption of Agentic AI deliberately. That is one thread that runs through this report, and this presentation will make good of that promise. Agentic AI has also unlocked and unraveled the concept I called capacity economics. And capacity economics has to do with how limited resources are deployed or how limited resources can be used to create enabling environment that enables the creation of value. And a failure to harness and harmonize these limited resources can also drastically affect operation. Agentic AI and the disruption, the implication and imperatives for global business. Projected market size by 2030 is $139.2 billion. Compound annual rate in growth for the adoption of Agentic AI is about 40.5% to 50 to 41%. And then enterprise, 79% of enterprises are now piloting AI agents. It is safe to say that Agentic AI is not just coming, it is here with us. Quickly, what is the technical difference between Agentic AI and generative AI? Generative AI plays an augmenting role where it helps the workforce to work smarter and faster. It responds to a single prompt, produces text, code, or images. It also executes the next step. It doesn't have the capacity to execute the next step without human intervention. No persistent memory of goals, and it is bounded to one conversation per time. But for Agentic AI, now, for the lack of better words, I have coined my own coinage. Agentic AI can also be referred to as autonomous intelligence. And one of the distinction and how it differs, one of the ways it differs from generative AI is that while generative AI responds to a single prompt, Agentic AI pursues multi-step objective. It plans and uses tools and takes action. It executes workflows from end to end and maintains states and adapts to results. Operates continuously across systems. This is a simple analogy. The difference between generative AI and agentic AI, put in simple pictures. Imagine that you want to employ a driver. Generative AI is like that driver you employ, but you are telling the driver how to drive. That's generative AI. But agentic AI, you employ a driver that already knows how to drive. That's the difference. So what do you benefit from these two? The difference is that with the first scenario where you have to employ a driver and you have to tell the driver how to drive, in that case, you have to stay awake with the driver while driving in the vehicle. Both of you have to be active through the journey. It means he's only just steering the wheels while you're passing the instruction. In both cases, you're both active. But for agentic AI, that is the flip. You are bringing in a professional who knows how to drive. This time, you don't even need to sit at the front seat. You take your place at the owner's point and have a sleep while you can even decide to take a nap while the professional driver is driving. The major striking difference is this. The first scenario of the agentic AI, you are still active. It does not substitute your input in the process, meaning that you have a driver, but you are teaching the driver or you're telling the driver how to drive. You are still pretty much active. It doesn't substitute or replace your role. But for the second scenario, your role in teaching the driver how to drive is automatically replaced by the capacity of the driver to use his professional intelligence and experience to tell when to make a turn and when not to make a turn. A market compounding faster than cloud's early years. Now, during the dawn of cloud computing, it took a process of time for people to fully embrace the benefit of launching on the cloud. And that transition from a physical portal or a physical server to a cloud-based server was a slow process. But the script was totally flipped for agentic AI. Because of its substitutionary role, agentic AI, with the promise of frictional decline in operation or decline in operational friction, AI adoption was pretty much fast. And the global agentic AI market size as of 2025 to this point is put at around $139.2 billion and is put at about $7.3 billion from 2025. And for 2026, it increased significantly to $9.1 billion. And it is projected to hit $139.2 billion before 2034. And the compound annual growth rate from 2026 is projected to hit 40.5% in 2034. And the growth, it is expected to grow 19 times by 2030 versus 2026. And in 2026, agentic AI spend includes embedded capabilities by Gartner is about $201.9 billion. Adoption is everywhere, but production is rare. Enterprises are experimenting faster than they are operationalizing. And the gap between adopting agentic AI and the value that comes from agentic AI will be the difference that makes or mar enterprises in the race to win the market share. Closing the gap between experimentation and operationalization is what would close the competitive gap and define the competitive advantage for enterprises. 80%, the reality on ground here today is that 80% of enterprises adopt and ship agentic AI in the first quarter of 2026. And they do this by embedding its features and its capabilities in their existing products. So it is said or reported by fact that as at quarter one in 2026, organizations embedded at least one AI agent. Then 31% of enterprises have at least one AI agent running at production. But unfortunately, 11% run agentic AI at meaningful production scale across the business. It starts at 80% with the excitement and enthusiasm. It drops again at production. Then when it gets to the point of scaling production, the adoption of AI drops again. So there's a huge gap between adoption and hitting the value that adopting agentic AI can create. That means you don't get them before. And you don't get them before. That's password you create. Then you don't get them before now. No need to create a new profile.
Yes, okay. Okay, I get profile before like
Now the profile is this.
this one.
And your profile now. No be your picture. Your profile is this, so you go create page now. You see, I see all profile. Only one profile you get, so create page. Public. So now that question when your wife they ask you which name you want to use. Now you will create the name. Then which category you did. Whether na education, whether na business, whether na technology. So that's where you put them. So give them
each have more than one
category. No, category is one. Then you write small biography about everything you want to do with the page. So the page name.
I want to use baseline.
Okay.
You know what I'm going to do? I want you to help me scrutinize.
Okay. Baseline is still okay, but what do you want to do?
Baseline means whatever I come up with, we are not just going to be discussing. We want to use the minimal lesson we want to get from here. What is the take point home? Is the minimal.
So you're dealing with fundamentals. We're dealing with the basic now.
Yes.
Baseline is still okay. Adoption is uneven across sectors. Share of organizations using AI agent in some capacity by industry by 2026. What are the organizations that are adopting the use of agentic AI? And how does this compare to themselves? Study has shown that financial services have embraced the use of agentic AI by 91%. Then followed by technology, 88%. Then the healthcare, 74%. Retail and e-commerce, 72%. Manufacturing has adopted it for 68%. And government have the least adoption rate of 41%. Government institutions and parastatal embraced the use of agentic AI only by 41%. Financial services and technology definitely take the lead in the adoption of agentic AI. And they take the lead on infrastructure maturity and readiness in terms of data. Government and regulated sectors trail on procurement and compliance rather than capability. Government is lagging behind as a result of compliance overhead rather than capability. The perceive, reason, act, and learn loop. What separates an agent from a chatbot is closed loop. It has the ability to sense context, decide and execute what tools, and also has the ability to adapt and adjust as it goes. It has the ability to refine itself. First, it perceives. By the perception, it means data and context are ingested from systems, documents, user goals in real time. And then after ingesting context and understanding it, it progresses into reasoning. At this stage, it plans a multi-step approach. It weighs options and it then selects the right tools. At stage 3, it has the ability to take initiative, which is act. Here, it executes across applications, APIs, and workflows with or without approval gateways. Learn. It evaluates outcomes, updates state, and refines the next decision cycle. A state is more like a state is what the agentic AI is able to remember and use. What agentic AI is able to remember and use is called a state. Where the returns are concentrating. The average reported return on investment by sector is indexed against initial deployment cost. Healthcare and life sciences trails behind by 580%. Financial services a little better at 640%, and technology at 720%. 66% of companies using AI agents report measurable productivity gains, while value concentrates in sectors. Why does value concentrate in these 3 sectors of health, financial services, and technology? In the previous slide, we saw how adoption rate is highest for financial services. But when measured in technology, when measured against return on investment, technology here seems to outperform financial services and the healthcare in terms of return on investment. And why is this so? It's because of high volume, rules adjacent decisions, clean, structured, and well-governed data, clear cost baselines to measure against, and executive sponsorship and dedicated budget. The illustrative use case driving early return on investment is software. Coding agents cut development cycle time by up to 71%. Banking, fraud detection agent reached 98 to 99% flagging accuracy. And healthcare, one of the use case of agentic AI in healthcare is clinical documentation agents that saves approximately 60 plus above minutes of. It saves about 60 and above minutes per shift. And this information is sourced at ASICS Intelligence, OneReach AI, Accelerate 2026 Industry Survey. Technology shows great signs of return on investment because of high volume. Because of high volume. It is more consumed by a varied and a larger size of consumers compared to financial services and technology and healthcare. The 5 forces that are shaping the enterprise. Agentic AI does not stay contained to a use case. It presses on every dimension of the operating model at once, from workforce and roles to operating models to competitive dynamics, trust and risk, and capital allocation. Autonomy raises the cost of getting oversight wrong. Every unit of autonomy an agent gains is a unit of oversight the enterprise must design for. 1 in 8 security incidents in 2026 attributed to AI agent misconfiguration or over permissioning. 40+% of agentic AI of projects forecast to be cancelled by 2027 on cost and governance grounds. 84% of leaders say they are comfortable with autonomous decisions only for narrowly scoped processes. Although agentic AI promises to bring relief to operational friction and promises to also bring labor costs down by a wide margin. However, it must not go without saying that agentic AI, because of its ability to perform autonomously, also in that capacity is an inherent downside of actually going with a tendency or running with a tendency to go out of behavior. And like we see, say 1 in 8 security incidents reported in 2026 shows that agentic AI was responsible misconfiguration of AI agents. When businesses have designed to adopt agentic AI, they must not compromise on governance, and they must not compromise on creating enabling standards and defining the baselines from the beginning. This is critically important. Governance is an aspect of adopting AI intelligence that cannot be negotiated. And this is because autonomy, just like they said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Giving agentic AI the rights and power to reason and act and then modify the process on their own and produce outcomes based on their own personal choice of refinement is a downside that can only be cured through governance. What is governance? Governance is simply providing government or control to agentic AI. It also means setting the boundaries and defining the extent and the limit to the operation of agentic AI. It is important because when you imagine a driver without rules or drivers. Imagine a driver allowed to drive on his terms without road signs, without road rules, without road regulations, without penalties, without any form of checks, without any form of traffic rules or regulations. There is a high tendency of collapse. There's a high tendency of compromises on the side of the driver. There's a high chance of accidents when drivers are left to drive on their terms without standards, without rules, without governance. The same is with agentic AI. And the reason why governance is very important to agentic AI adoption is that human in the loop gates or irreversible or high value action. Full audit trails of agent decisions and tool calls. Least privilege access scoped per agent per task. Independent testing before autonomy is expanded. Clear accountability owner for every deployed agent. Kill switch and rollback tested before it goes live. Kill switch and rollback. Rollbacks are new updates to a software. So rollbacks must be tested before they go live. Governance is the art of providing government and control, regulation and constitution for how an agentic AI should perform. What it should do, what it should not do. What it can do, and what it should not do. Autonomy raises the cost of getting oversight wrong. Capacity relief, not just headcount reduction. The strongest driver of adoption is a bandwidth gap, not novelty. It's a bandwidth gap, not novelty. One of the growth drivers in the era of agentic AI would be not just novelty. The newness of an idea will not be the reason for growth. What enables growth, or what drives growth? And one of the most consistent thread is that growth is largely driven not by novelty, but by the capacity economic. What is the economics of capacity? The economics of capacity is how available capacity in an organization limits, enables, or affect the cost and value of what can produce or deliver. Capacity economics is about how are the limited resources and capacity within an organization, how does it enable or affect the cost and value of what it can produce or deliver. In the case of agentic AI, capacity economics is that in agentic AI, it shows that the relationship, capacity economics in agentic AI simply explains that why businesses can scale their operations. Businesses can scale their operations without necessarily increasing their limited resources of labor, human labor. So with agentic AI, an increase in the use or adoption of agentic AI does not necessarily require an increase in human labor. As a matter of fact, human labor does not increase proportionately with the expansion of the adoption of agentic AI. As a matter of fact, as agentic AI adoption increases, there is expected to be a decline in human labor. Growth is not driven by novelty, but it is driven by the capacity economics. And this is exactly how roles are shifting: task execution, agent orchestration, and exception handling. Five moves every executive team must make. 1. Audit before you automate. Map decision point by volume, risk, and reversibility before assigning agents. Every task that must be automated only after comparing decision against the volume, risk of the decision, and the reversibility of it. 2. Govern autonomy explicitly. Here you have to define approval gates. Where does the buck end? Audit trails and accountability owners upfront. Fix the data foundation. Before you adopt, agents amplify whatever data quality that already exists, good or bad. A good and better performing agentic AI is as good as the data and the context that is ingested for it. A good context will be amplified by the agent, just like a bad context will be amplified by the agents. Therefore, it is important for executives who are adopting agentic AI to be very critical and detailed on the context and the quality of data that is used for the agentic AI. Fourth, executives and businesses must reskill ahead of deployment. Build orchestration and oversight skills before agents go live, not after. Capacity is critical. Competencies is critical. And one of the recommendations we give is businesses and individuals must reconcile the differences in the responsibility of retooling, reskilling, upskilling, and redeploying, because agentic AI is a pretty much novel idea, and because of that, organizations must train people with matching competence to level up to the use and adoption of agentic AI. In the form of training, capacity is built. And when capacity is built, we have a team of people or a group of people who have the competence to match the performance and direction for agentic AI. Measure value relentlessly. That executive must tie every deployment to a hard cost, revenue, or risk metric, not novelty. We must not excuse or dismiss the need to measure the value of adoption of agentic AI. It's not so much about newness or novelty. Growth is driven only by capacity economics, not by novelty. Therefore, interest must not be given Our attention must not be invested in novelty, but rather on precise, measurable values like cost, revenue, and risk metric. A 90-day path from pilot to production ready. Week 1 to 2 is access to deploy an agentic AI. From week 1 to week 2, you assess. Week 3 to week 6, you pilot. Week 5 to week 8, you govern. Week 9 to week 13, you scale. Event starts a little bit first before an agentic AI is deployed. There is the need for assessment to be taken. Here, you are taking inventory of workflows, score by value, risk. You select 2 to 3 pilot candidates. 3 to 4, 3 to 6 weeks you pilot. Here you deploy narrow scope agent, especially where a multi-agent is going to be developed, where multiple agents will be developed or created. Don't start by going out fully. Start narrow to understand the agent and understand the loop gates with clear key performance index. Governance. Stand up audit trails, access controls, and accountability model in parallel. Then you scale. When you've taken cognizance of access, pilot, and govern, the next will be to scale. To scale here means after you've tested your multiple agents, you can now expand proven agents, retire pilots that missed KPIs, and fund the winners. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the imperatives is that the disruption by agentic AI is not coming. It's not a subject of the future. It is already being deployed. Companies are already adopting. Companies are already shifting. Companies and enterprises are already transitioning. And the organizations that win within this decade of adoption will not be the ones with the most agents. They will be the ones that govern, measure, and scale them fastest. Again, summarily, AI, especially agentic AI, is one that has come with labor market and workforce impact. But alongside the promises of limiting or reducing operational friction, there's also the concern of risk and governance. In a nutshell, agentic AI has the capacity to plan, act, observe, and adapt. The imperative is not just to adopt. The imperative is to govern. The implication of enterprises turning their eyes to the other direction and ignoring the transitional shift is that they risk becoming obsolete and they risk losing to emerging brands who have the competitive advantage in an unprecedented form. And with that, they are already equipped with the tools to exceed and outcompete traditional businesses. Traditional businesses will no longer thrive on the ground of legacy structures alone, but they will thrive on their ability to leverage experience on flexibility. Leverage experience on flexibility. And the technical distinction between generative AI and agentic AI was clearly discussed. One of the most prominent distinction is the fact that agentic AI contrasts in the sense that it operates in a continuous loop. It operates in a continuous loop. And the analogy of the driver was to use to measure. We are no longer talking about efficiency in the age of agentic AI. Efficiency is a lesser subject of debate. We have moved on from there to talking about hyper efficiency. And hyper efficiency will help to make the difference between organizations who are adopting and those who are not adopting. The milk itself is not in adoption, but it's in governance. And not just is it in governance, but it is also in the ability of the organization to execute. And not only to execute, but to stay true to it till the end, as we have seen that there is 70% adoption, then it declined to 31% at production, then at scale it drops back to 11%. That gap must be addressed by first understanding the reason for the transition and the problems that that transition solved. And there's a widening gap again between stated adoption and operational reality, between the value created by agentic AI and the adoption of it. Of course, capacity economics, it doesn't go without speaking about capacity economics. And that explains that businesses can scale their operations they can scale their operation and decrease the labor required for that scale. Because while generative AI does not replace, it augments. Agentic AI has the capacity to do the job of 10 and loop it through an autonomous process. So, ladies and gentlemen, treat what we've discussed so far with some level of seriousness, and this remains our topic on generative AI and the global business disruption episode. This is prepared for executive leadership, strategy, and innovation. And on that note, I'd like to say thank you for your time and stay continuously blessed as you get on with the journey of value and scale. Ezekiel